Hello, in this video we'll talk about the ERD and the EER. The ERD is the entity relational diagram and the ER is the enhanced entity relational diagram. Now usually when you create a database which will look something like this for your customer, usually the first step is that you sit with your customer and he start talking about what is the purpose of database. He will start telling you about things about his business, points about his business, and you will listen to these points, and from these points you will figure out what are the main things that you need to put in the database. So it will all start with a regular talk, a sit between you and the customer, and he start talk to you like these things, and then you need to pick up the points that will be the core design of the database for your customer. Now from these points you will create what is called the ERD, the entity relational diagram. But to create this ERD you need the tools to create the ERD. So after figuring out what are the basic points, what are the basic things that you need to put in this database, you will require some tools, or what's called the components of the ERD diagram. The ERD diagram consists of three main components: the entity, the relation, and the attribute. The entity is the table, the relation, and the attribute. The attribute is called the columns in that table. The entity is the table, and the relation is the relation between two entities, between two tables. These are the main three components that will consist in any, and that will build any ERD or EER diagrams. Now let's go and figure out what are these entities, what are the sub-entities, and how we can relate these things to each other. Now the entity in general, as we have said, it's a table. The table has three types: either it's a strong entity, a weak entity, or associative entity. Any table that has a primary key, this will be called as a strong entity. Any table that doesn't have a primary key, then it will be called a weak entity. The associative entity is a table that will be linking two strong entities. We will see down the road what is the meaning of this. So the associative entity is a table that will be the link table between two strong entities. Usually we use an associative entity when we have a many-to-many relation, between two entities. In that case we will create a middle table which is called the associative table, or commonly known as the composite or the bridge table. So the bridge table or the associative entity is a table that is linking two strong tables, two strong entities. Now let's see what are the remaining components. The attributes is the columns in any table. So any column in any table will be called as an attribute. The attributes has different types. Now by the way, you can draw this ERD or the ER using your pen and paper. Whenever your customer talk, you sit and you are drawing using these three components, and you are drawing the basic design of the customer database. Now there is another way to draw this ERD, which is using there are some online ERDs that you can build any ERD. So as you can see here, we are using the three components: the entity, the relation, and the attribute. So let's go back to here and we will talk one by one, and then we will see how we can draw them using the online editor. The attributes, as we have known, it is a column. There are many types of these columns, either a strong entity, strong attribute, unique, composite, derived, and multi-valued. Let's talk one by one. The strong column is just a normal column without any specification, just a normal column that we will put in a table. The unique column, the unique attribute, it has to be a primary key or a unique key. A primary key or a unique key. Usually you will see how you will know this a unique attribute by seeing this underline line. See this underline? That means this is a unique key, whether it's a primary key or a unique key. So here you can see that this attribute, either a primary key or a unique, this attribute the same as in this table, in this entity. So the C name is the primary key for this entity, for the category table. Here the SSN is the primary key for the employee entity, for the employee table. And likewise you can see whenever you see an underline on any attribute, that means this attribute is a primary key or a unique. Let's move on with the other attribute, which is called the derived attribute. The derived attribute. The derived attribute, which is resemble like this, which is an elliptic shape with dot, not with dot. Now the strong attribute is a complete elliptic shape, while the derived attribute is a dot elliptic shape. So the derived attribute, what does it mean? It means that is something that from this value, from this column, we can derive another column. In our case here, the age. So this is the entity, employee entity or the employee table. It has a column by the name of age, which is a derived entity. How we can figure out that this is a derived attribute? Because from the age we can derive the birth date. When we know the age of the employee, that means we will be able to know when was this employee birth date. So the birth date is derived from the age. That's why when we see something like this, or when you see any attribute that we can derive from it something else, that means this attribute is a derived attribute. Okay, let's move on with the other attribute, which is the composite attribute. This is the shape of the composite attribute. It's also an elliptic, but you will have two these strings in here. If you see this, that means this is a composite attribute. What is the composite attribute? The composite attribute, for instance, let's see the employee entity, employee table. This employee should have a name. Every employee should have a name. Now the name of the employee can be split into three attributes: the first name, the middle name, and the last name. So any attribute that we can split into other attributes, this attribute will be called a composite attribute. So the employee name, we can split it into first name, middle name attribute, and last name attribute. And likewise for the address of this employee. The address we can split into the state where he lives, the city he lives, the street where he lives, and the building name where he lives. So from the address we can split address attribute, we can split it into other attributes. If we can split it, that means this attribute, the address attribute, is a composite attribute. Another example is the phone number. So if the employee has a phone number, this phone number will be called as a composite attribute. How? Because the phone number consists of country code, area code, and the phone number. So we can split the phone number into 3 attributes. That's why we call it a composite attribute. Okay, now let's move on to the last attribute type, which is the multi-valued attribute. You can see this is a double elliptic shape, double. When we see a double elliptic shape, that means this attribute is a multi-valued attribute. Now, where we can assign an attribute and put it as a multi-valued. Suppose that an employee, the employee has an email, but he doesn't have only one email. So he has multiple emails, 2 emails, or maybe 3 emails. In this case, the email attribute will be considered as a multi-valued attribute. For instance, if we add to this in here, we will call a multi-valued. As you can see here, that we have got a multi-valued, and then we connect it to the employee. So the employee and this attribute, let's say we will name it as email. So the email of the employee could have 1 or 2 or maybe 3 emails. In this case, this email attribute is a multi-valued attribute. I hope this will clarify all the types of the attributes. So the attributes are the columns in a entity, in a table. They are strong, which is normal column, unique attribute, which is either primary key or unique, and we will see the underline, either derived attribute, elliptic shape with dots derived from the age, something we derived from this attribute, like birthday and age. The composite is with this shape. It's an attribute that we can split into other attributes, like we have seen the name or the address or the mobile or the phone number. And finally, the multi-valued attribute, which is in the case double elliptic shape, like the email. 1 email, 2 emails. A person can have 1, 2, 3 emails. So this is a multi-valued attribute. Now let's talk about the relation. There are 2 types of relations, either strong or weak. Strong or weak. And let's see here. So what is the relation between? To build a relation, first of all, this is the shape, the diamond shape. This is the diamond shape of a relation. So whenever you create a relation, this is the type of the relation. By the way, these shapes are pre-assigned, so you cannot select your own shapes. These shapes are standardized, so you cannot create a shape by your own. So this is a diamond shape, is the shape of a relationship. Now what is the relationship? The relationship is what is the relation between 2 entities, between 2 tables. For instance, now let's see the product and the category. This is a table of products and another table of category. Now we will give a name to this relationship, a verb for this relationship. So the products and the category, what are the relation between them? We need to assign each product to a category. So the relationship is assigned. It has to be a verb. Remember, inside the relationship, it has to be a verb. So we need to assign every product to a category. Every product related to the category, we need to assign a category to each product. We need to assign a category to each product. This is the meaning of the relationship. The relationship shape is a diamond, and inside it we put a verb. Now, what is a weak relationship? What is a weak relationship? Let's talk about the weak relationship. The relationship shape is also a diamond, but with double diamonds, one inside the other. Let's see a relationship in here. Now, let's have a strong entity, a strong table, which is a faculty. Now, this faculty has teachers inside, professors, teachers who teach inside this faculty. Now, each teacher possibly have a family. So the relation between the teacher and the faculty is a strong relation. But the relation between the family of the teacher and the faculty is a weak relation. The family is related to the teacher, and the teacher is related to the faculty. So the teacher have a strong relation to the faculty, the family has a strong relation to the teacher, but the family has a weak relation to the faculty. That's the meaning of the weak relation. And whenever we use a weak relation, we need to use a weak entity. So a weak entity, weak relationship. Now, in general, we will use a double line in here. A double line. Whenever we have a weak relation with a strong entity, we need to put a double line, not a single line. Unfortunately, I couldn't do a double line here, so that's why I put a single line. But in general, when you have a weak relation to a strong entity, then you need to put a double line. And again, unfortunately, I couldn't do the double line in here. So that's the meaning of the weak relation. Now, what about the strong relation? The strong relation takes place between two strong entities. And it is connection will be a single line from both sides. So this is a strong relation between two strong entities. And the verb here, strong relation between two strong entities, and a single line to connect between them. So these are the details of the three components of any ERD. In the next video, we will talk about the cardinalities. What are the cardinalities and how we can start build a few simple ERDs.